All right, so we're looking at Chapter 12, Quadratic Equations and Applications. So this is Sections 12.2, Graph Quadratic Functions. And so this one's going to challenge your drawing capabilities, as you'll find it does mine. All right, when we're graphing these are really going to come out as parabolas. So basically, the simple quadratic function, f of x squared, is one of the functions we look at in the library of functions, if you remember. And then, depending on what we have, after that or before that, when the ax squared plus bx plus c, we can start changing our graph of the parabola around. We can make it, go face down. We can make it face up. We can squish it in, pull it out, stretch it and shrink it. And so that's going to be what all the things are we're going to look at. Right now we're just looking at the basics. When you get to 1400, that'll take a lot more into consideration. You'll do a lot of transformations. So with quadratic function in general, it's a polynomial. F of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And again, a cannot equal 0, otherwise we don't have the quadratic. And the first thing we get is a vertex. Well, the vertex of a quadratic function is basically negative b over 2a comma f of negative b over 2a. So what we're going to find is we're going to take the a and the b and we're going to plug it into this and we're going to get a value. And then that's going to give us this part. Then whatever that number turns out, we'll plug that back into the function. And when we do that, whatever value that comes out, that's going to be this part. So we'll get our x and y coordinates based on, the negative b over 2a part, and then plugging that number into our function and getting the y part. Okay. Now there's going to be 5 properties of a quadratic function that we're going to look at for this class. So and this is how we're going to graph it. We're going to look at each of the properties to be able to graph it. And so this is what a parabola looks like. This is one where we have it facing up, and then you could have one facing down and going down, so the arrows are going down instead of up, and you have the vertex higher. So this is our vertex. What other things we have something like the y-intercept here, where it crosses and hits the y-axis. We have the x-intercepts. We have 2 of those in this case because it hits 2 places. We have this thing called the axis of symmetry. And with everything we do with the 5 properties, we can usually plot each of these items, okay? And remember, the axis of symmetry says, well, if we find something on one side of the parabola, it's going to be equal on the other side. So if we, know our vertex is here and it hits the y-axis here, well, whatever that position is from the axis of symmetry, there's going to be something on the other side here as well. And that's the same here. If all of a sudden we know we found that one, and it's going to be at this point, equal distance on the other side is going to be the other point. And same thing here, our 2 x-intercepts, they're going to be split in half, and it's 2 spaces this way and there's 2 spaces this way. So it kind of looks like, everything is split in half by that axis of symmetry. So property 1 is how the direction of the parabola goes. So is it facing up or facing down? And so if a is greater than 0, then the parabola opens up. So that's what it looks like when we have a greater than 0. And again, remember, our a is what's on the x squared. Now, if a is less than 0, then it opens down. So then it's going to come down and go in a different direction. And then property 2 is a vertex. And again, we know that we just plug in negative b over 2a, find that value, plug that back into our function, get the next value for our y, and that gives us our vertex. So our vertex is whatever we come up with here. Now property 3 is the y-intercept, and basically what we're going to do is we're going to plug in x equals 0. So usually it's going to be 0 comma whatever c is, because if you think about it, if you plug in x equals 0, those cancel, all that's left is c. So really we could also say 0 c really would be the same thing. Then we have the x-intercepts, and they're basically when we plug in y equals 0. So basically setting f of x equal to 0, so we're going to say 0 equals our equation, our function, and then what we usually do is we factor that. We use quadratic formula or whatever to get our 2 values for x out, and then our intercepts are going to be the 2 values of x we find, or 1, or however many there are, should be 1 or 2, and then it'll be x comma 0. Okay, so those are x-intercepts. In this case, we got the negative 1, 0, and here we got the 3, 0. And then our axis of symmetry, the thing that splits the thing in half, that's just going to be x equals negative b over 2a. And so basically wherever your vertex is, there's going to be the axis of symmetry going vertically through that thing, because that, remember, your vertex is negative b over 2a is your x, and so if x equals that value, then it's always going to be that value going up and down no matter what. And again, I've talked about the axis of symmetry. It's the line that intersects the vertex and splits the parabola in half. And so the symmetric about this axis. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to graph these, and the key really is to get those 5 properties figured out. Once you get the 5 properties and you can plot those on most 10 by 10 frames, you might not get the actual y-intercept, because sometimes that y-intercept you might have a negative 51. Well, trying to draw that in anything is going to be very hard, but you can get the rest of the points and kind of general shape of the graph. If we're drawing it by hand, that's good. All right, so property 1. What does property 1 tell us again? Property 1, well, that told us is, what is A? Well, here A is greater than 0, and so that means opens up, okay? So that's our first thing. Then we have property 2. Well, what does property 2 say? Well, that's when we're finding the vertex. So what is our vertex going to be? Well, it's going to be some ordered pair. And so first we have to find the minus b over 2a. Well, minus b, so it's going to be a minus 12 all over 2 times a, which is 2. So that's going to be 12 over 4, which is 3. So that is x. And now we plug 3 back into here, and so f of 3 is equal to 2 times 3 squared, and then minus 12 times 3 plus 10. And so that's going to be 9 times 2, so it's 18 minus 36 plus 10. So it's going to be 28 minus 36, so it's going to be minus 8. And so that's going to be our vertex, 3, negative 8. Now let's property 3. Property 3 was that intercept, y-intercept. And remember, that's the 0 comma c. In this case, c is 10. And so that's going to be our y-intercept. What about property 4? Well, property 4, we're going to set our function equal to 0 and solve. So 0 equals 2x squared minus 12x plus 10. Now, I see that there's a factor of 2 in all these, so kind of like we have been doing, I'm going to take and multiply by half. So that gives me 0 equals x squared minus 6x plus 5, and we got equal 0 on the left side now. And now I can factor that. That looks like it's going to be x minus 5, x minus 1, and so here x is equal to 5 and x equals 1, setting each of those equal to 0 and solving. And so 5 comma 0 and 1 comma 0, those are my x intercepts. And then our final property, number 5, is the axis of symmetry. And that's just the x equals, and now that's our part of our vertex, which is equal to 3. Okay. So now let's try to plot this on our graph over here. So what do we have first? Well, we know it opens up, so that's good. If we get something that doesn't open up, we'll be in trouble. So then 3, negative 8. So here, what are these by? 2, 4, 6, 8. So these by 2s. So this is 2, 4, 6, 8, and 3. So that looks like that's going to be our vertex. And so then after that, we have 0, 10 is going to be a point. And so 0, 10, that's going to be ours. And then we have 5, 0. So 2, 4, 5, 0, roughly there. And 1, 0. So that's roughly there. And we have the axis of symmetry. So that's here. And so that means what's on this side is going to be also over here. So, you know, we went over 1, 2, or 3 points. So 1, 2, 3 points. So that would be roughly there. And so now is the part where you have to draw. This is the part I always have trouble with, trying to make it look halfway decent. And same thing here. And those keep going up like that. And again, like I said, I can't draw very well, especially on the computer here. But those are going to be the graph we have. So we know, what do we know? Well, on the graph, we know we have the two x-intercepts, we have the y-intercept, we have this axis of symmetry, and we have the vertex, and it opens up like it said it was supposed to. And so that looks like we have a good graph, barring the smooth lines of drawing it. Okay. Now we could always check if we needed to. We could draw on here on our calculator. So we'd say y equals, and then that was 2x squared minus 12x plus 10, and we graph that. And this looks to be about right. So, that's going to be our vertex. So if we can trace this, 0, 10, that was on the graph. That was our intercept. And then we can kind of go down here. I don't know if it's going to actually give us the point. It won't, but, if we needed to, we could actually find that on the graph. And we go down some further, and that should be our intercept. But again, it's not going to show us exactly. We can see it's close to 3.8. And then it's probably not going to give us that. Oh, it gives that one 5.0, but it didn't give us the 1.0, but that's the other one. And then, if we go back up, it should give us something around 10 on here, but it would be at the 6, which, it's close, but it's not. So that's kind of how we can use a calculator. And I'm not going to show you all the nuances on how to find each of those points, because we're just doing this by finding all of these and graphing it that way. All right, so again, properties we're going to go through. So what do we have? We have property 1. That says A here is going to be -3, so that's less than 0. So that opens down. Okay. What about the next property? The next property is property 2. We need to find the vertex, and so we need to minus b, so minus 24 all over 2a, so 2 times -3, so it's 24 over 6 because our negatives cancel, and that's just 4. So that's going to be our first part. Now we have to find f of 4. So it's a -3 times 4 squared plus 24 times 4 minus 45. And we plug all that into our calculator. Guess what we get? We get the simple number 3. And again, I'm not going to show you all the calculator, just typing all that in, but we get 3 for that. So we have the vertex 4, 3. So 2, 4, then 2, 3. That's going to be our vertex. Property 3. Okay, so 4, 3. Put a parenthesis instead of equals. Property 3 was that intercept, the y-intercept. And when we plug in zeros here, we get -45. So 0, -45. So this is one where it's going to be way off charts. It's not ever going to hit on our graph we can see, but it's going to be way down there. Okay. Well, what about property 4? All right, so this one is when we set this equal to 0. So -3x squared plus 24x minus 45 equals 0. Now I see that there's a factor of 3 in each of these, so I'm going to multiply by a -1/3. That way I get a positive here, and I also end up with a 1. So that gives me x squared minus 8x, and then plus 15 equals 0. So that gives me x, and then minus 5x minus 3 equals 0. And so I get a 5, 0, and I get a 3, 0 for my two x-intercepts. Okay. And then our property 5, that was our x equals 4 is the axis of symmetry, okay? All right, so we plugged in our vertex when we started. Now let's plug in our x-intercepts. So we had a 5, 0, so that's going to be right here. And we have a 3, 0, which is right there. And it's going to open down, which looks right, because, you know, we're going to go like this. And so that would be something like we have. And again, this is going to keep going down and down until we hit the negative 45 and hit the y-axis here. And then in a similar manner, this is going to go down there. But this is kind of how it's going to be for this one. We're just going to stop at that point. That way we don't have that. And the only last thing is that axis of symmetry. And that's just this dotted line right through our vertex all the way through, okay? All right, what about the next one? And again, all these are going to be doing the same thing. We're looking for the 5 properties. We're going to plot what we can and draw as close a semblance to a parabola as we can with our tools we have with us here. All right, so what do we have? For property 1, a is less than 0, so it opens down because we have a negative 1 here. Then property 2, here we have a minus b, which is 6, over 2 times a, which is negative 1. So those negatives cancel. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So our vertex is 3, comma. Now we have f of 3. So that's a minus 3 squared plus 6 times 3 minus 5. So it's 18 minus 5 third, and then minus 9. And so that looks like it's going to be a 4. Okay. And so that's our vertex. So 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now property 3, that's our y-intercept. And again, that's where this is equal to x is 0, and then our y is just negative 5. And so 0, negative 5, that hits about right there. We have property 4. Now we take our negative x squared plus 6x minus 5 equals 0. Now, again, to factor these, I'm going to change this. I'm going to multiply everything by a negative 1. And so I get x squared minus 6x plus 5 equals 0. And so x minus 5, x minus 1. Why do I have a 6 there? Equals 0. So then x is equal to a 5 and x is equal to a 1. So I'll have 5 comma 0 and 1 comma 0. So 1 comma 0 is right there, and 5 comma 0 is right there. And if they stay, nope. And then our last property is the axis of symmetry. And that's at x equals what? X equals 3. Okay. And so we could go ahead and type or draw that in because it's kind of down the center there. And remember, this one, we can go across here and go the same distance. And so that would be right there. And so does that make it easier to draw through? Not necessarily, because I totally missed the value, but that's okay. And that one I hit at least. But then again, that's just a general shape of the thing. You know, it really would go through that line there. But the key thing is, can you get the properties? Okay, drawing them, you know, Hopefully on the computer it's going to be a little easier as far as if you actually have to draw, or if you just choose actual parabola, or you just have to go ahead and do these things. Kind of depends on the problem, on what you have to do. Some of them will say, okay, what is, you know, the x-intercepts? What are the y-intercept? What is the vertex? Things like that. So you just kind of have to type in what they want, or if it needs you to draw a picture, you draw a picture. All right, what about this one? Okay, well here we have property 1 is a is greater than 0, so opens up. Property 2, here we have a minus 12 over 2 times 2, so that's going to be 12 over 4, which is 3. So 3 comma. Okay, now we plug in f of 3. So 2 times 3 squared minus 12 times 3 plus 16. So that's going to be 9 times 2 is 18 minus 36 plus 16. And that all probably better go to the right. That's going to be equal to 20, 32. So that's going to be a minus 2. And so then, so 3 minus 2, so 3 minus 2 is going to be roughly there. It's opening up, so it's going to go up. Well, we also already know property 5, but we'll wait and do property 5 in a little bit. So property 3, so we have y-intercept is equal to 0, and our intercept is at 16. So it's going to be way up here. We're not going to actually hit it on this graph part. Property 4, we're going to say 2x squared minus 12x plus 16 equals 0. And we're going to make it simpler, so multiply by half because they all have a factor of 2. So x squared minus 6x and divide by 8 equals 0. So x minus 4, x minus 2, and so x equals 4, x equals 2, so we'll have 4 comma 0 and a 2 comma 0. All right, so 2 comma 0 is right there, 4 comma 0 is right there. And our property 5, which we already alluded to, the axis is symmetry. That's going to be x equals 3. And that's what we'd expect because our vertex is right there. And so this is going to go up, and this is going to go up. And again, it's not going to cross here until we hit the 16. And so we know it's going to be really going up at a very steep angle here. All right, what about this one? Well, again, we're gonna just practice these. I think I'll do this was the last for this video, then I'll do 5 more in a different video. But again, we're just practicing those 5 properties and then drawing what we get out of those. So property 1. Well, here a is less than 0, so it's gonna open down. Property 2, we have a minus b, so it's gonna be minus a minus 60 equals, and then we have on the bottom 2 times negative 5. And so it looks like we have 60 over a negative 10, so it's a negative 6. And so if we take f of negative 6, that's going to be a negative 5 times negative 6 squared minus 60 times negative 6 minus 175. Notice our y-intercept at negative 175, we're never going to get to that point there. So, well, one thing we won't have to worry about actually seeing that intercept hit. And if we multiply and add all that together, that ends up actually being only a 5. So that's going to be our point. So negative 6, so 2, 4, 6, and then up 5, 2, 4, 5. And so that's going to be our vertex. Property 3. That's our y-intercept we were talking about. And at 0, negative 175, it's going to be way down below there. We're never going to see it on this graph. Property 4. We have a minus 5x squared minus 60x minus 175 equals 0. Now, they all have a factor of 5 in them, and I'm going to take and make that first one a positive. So if I divide by negative 5, that's going to give me x squared plus, and that's going to give me 12x, that's going to give me plus, and that's going to be 35. And so now 2 factors of 35 that add to 12, so it's x plus 5, x plus 7. And so x is equal to negative 5, and x equals a negative 7, so negative 5, 0, and negative 7, 0. So here we have 2, 4, 5, and here we have 6, 7. So those are our 2 intercepts. And our last property, 5, is the axis of symmetry. And that says that x equals a negative 6. And so that's just like that. Okay. All right, so drawing that, it opens down, so we're pretty sure that was the case anyway. But it just keeps going. And this one keeps going as well. And in any cases that you wanted to add extra points, you could always plug in points here. You know, if we wanted to see what was maybe at the -8 and the -4, we could plug those in, and we could see where it would be on those on the y-axis. And but you know, just these, we get a general shape, and that's kind of what we're looking for here, is the general shape. And then into the right direction, we have the intercepts, we have the vertex, axis of symmetry. So those are the key points here. All right, so that's what I'm going to stop with for this video, and then I'll make another video with 5 more.